Hello, guys, and welcome once again to another awesome episode of the Flama podcast, the ultimate guide to the gaming industry. I am your host, Angel, and today we have a first. We have a first mentor that will talk about narrative. We'd had gameplay designers, we'd had game directors, we've had artists, we've had people who use games as marketing. We had a huge variety of mentors, but today it's our first mentor that will talk about narrative. Andy, you're a little bit of a renaissance man. Something that really, and which is why I really admire you, because I want to be something like that in the future. You're a writer, you have been a creative director, you have been a game director. I think you have also worked in art. You have this plethora of creative work. How do you do it?
Well, thank you for inviting me to the show. It's great to chat with you. I think how do I do it? It's a little bit of a sort of fly by the seat of your pants situation. A lot of the time, I'm doing stuff um, reacting to whatever demands are made of me, and I will have demands from. And you got to realize that I'm now a consultant rather than in full-time employment. So when I was in full-time employment, the demands of the client would ask me to create whatever it needed for the day, and so my day would be sort of dictated by the requirements of my boss and whatever project I was on. Being a consultant, that still happens, but I have I'm sort of balancing my own time at the same time. So, I will have projects that are working in the background. I will have things that I want to do that are way down the line. And really, it's just about scheduling. It's about working out what needs to be done first, what deadlines are really, really important, and then sort of working backwards from there. So if I know that a comic is needed by September and it's sort of early May, I know that a comic is going to take about 3 months, May, June, July, August. I've got to put all my focus into the comic. I've got to make sure that the comic story is written, that the lore relates to the project and is signed off, and that the team that are doing all the artwork, because I also produce, so I will be sort of corralling all the different disciplines, the artist, the colorist, the letterer. I'll be typesetting as well. So all of that needs to sort of happen. And while that's happening, a lot of the other projects I just leave. Um, and if I get a free moment, I will then be working on it. And I think it's just about understanding how to juggle projects. And that will happen even if you've got a full-time job. I mean, full-time jobs are a little bit easier because you'll have a commute time usually. So if I was going to the office, I would walk down to the station. That's a half an hour walk. I'd get on the train. I'd know that would be 40 minutes. That would be 40 minutes of dead time. So in that 40 minutes, I would go, right, I am going to write for myself, my own stuff. That means 40 minutes to the office, 40 minutes back from the office. That's a good hour and a bit worth of writing that I'm going to get per day. Now, if you times that by five, that's almost like 6 hours of writing a week I'm going to get done. So that's kind of how I would manage it when I was doing my day job. And now I'm a consultant. It's a little bit more sort of I'm at home, and it's like, okay, no, I need to find an hour to do it, and that means dedication, and that means being really disciplined with my time, and that's how you do it.
Gotcha. I can totally relate to what you're saying. So when it comes to, so you're saying basically what you have to do is know how to schedule yourself, how to organize yourself. But when
Yep.
it comes to creativity, right? Creativity, as we know, is born in like the chaos of the human mind. And as a creative person, it's difficult to bring order and to schedule and to organize because we tend to be a little bit more like free thinkers, more like nebulous. We have ideas, things that we want to do. It's difficult to like be more structured. How do you do that to balance that creativity and order,
You're,
basically?
you're absolutely right. There is a chaos to it, and I think there is some sort of I embrace chaos. The more chaotic things are, the better I tend to be with my own work. So, and that's really, my brain is constantly thinking of ideas. So there's always like a notepad, or I'll write things down on a little sort of idea dump file. And that idea dump file is then, you know, perhaps never looked at for a couple of years. But if I get a germ of an idea and it's something that I want to develop, perhaps down the line, I'll noodle with it for a little bit and then put it away, and then maybe come back to it and noodle it for something like the hero interviews, for argument's sake. I had the idea of a sort of a question and answer adventure, so to speak, in a narrative form, all Q&A, a bit like the start of The Incredibles, where you got this Mr. Incredible talking to camera, telling people what it's like to be a hero. And I'd already done that for 45, my debut graphic novel, and I wanted to go into sort of D&D territory. And so I had this idea about, I don't know, 8 years ago, and I noodled something down. I did a little bit, and I never got to it. And it just happened that, I'd worked on Campaigns and Companions, which was a D&D inspired sort of cats and dogs playing Dungeons and Dragons dialogue, that I thought actually I could perhaps go back to and use all the different experiences that, the lessons that I've learned over the years, especially from writing. I'll come back to it, even if it's 8 years down the line. It doesn't mean that just because you do. The thing about writing is you want to get it out there and then. And I feel that that's not necessarily, and that's a good thing, but it means that something else has to give when you do that. So if you immediately jump on the idea rather than let it perhaps percolate in like
Yeah, letting it
or
cook, right?
let it brew for a while,
Yeah.
and noodling something down and going, actually that doesn't work, and leaving it and then coming back to it maybe years down the line when you go, oh, I had that really good idea, and then you go to it and you go, actually I'm almost ready within myself because I've done a load of writing. I feel quite confident now. Now is the time to attack this. And I mean, the hero interviews probably took me about a year and a half, 2 years to write and edit. Um, and I had a very good editor, Erica Marks, that was working on it and helping me at the same time. So it was great because I had somebody sort of prodding me, keeping me going, reading it, going, this is really good, keep going. So that was almost having like a little cheerleader, and Erica did an amazing job putting this together. So it sometimes it's about getting the alignment of stars, and it doesn't necessarily mean just because something doesn't maybe happen straight away, or you get no interest from people, because a lot of the stuff I'm trying to publish, and sometimes it's just not the right time for this project. And so it's okay to put it away. It's okay to go, okay, I'm not going to touch this. I'm going to do something totally different. I'm going to go off on a tangent for a couple of years, going in a different direction, new ideas, and then I'm going to use whatever I've learned from those couple of years, and see if I can get this to cook again, into something even, something awesome that perhaps hadn't been quite fully realized. So that's how I do it.
Yeah. So Andy, you were talking about working as a consultant, and you said now you're working in the Warhammer universe. Uh, I'm new to the Warhammer universe. I actually started playing Space Marine 2 recently, and I really like it. And one of the things my friend who recommended it said is, dude, the lore, the lore, the lore. That dude is always talking about the lore, and he explains everything in detail. So the lore is very important for that universe. How do you feel coming into that universe and adding your grain of sand to it? How do you feel?
Um, Look, I've played Warhammer for many years. I used to, collect the figures, so I've got some sort of working knowledge of Warhammer. So I'm a little bit familiar with it. I sort of understand the concept of it, the main protagonists and antagonists. But you're right, the lore is really rich. it's huge, it's daunting, and I think depending on the story that you're working, have been asked to work on, and I can't say too much because I'm on NDA and it still hasn't been announced
Of
fully,
course.
but I can say that I'm working on it. That's okay.
Cool.
I think you have to sort of compartmentalize the lore and just break it down into its granular sort of essence of, what part of the lore is important to this particular story, and what stuff can you sort of just not have to worry about, because unless you're some sort of walking encyclopedia, you're not going to take on everything. And even if you do take on it as much as you can and you absorb, I've got some game books upstairs from Warhammer, the battle tomes and everything that I'm reading at the moment. And I'm not going to be able to absorb everything in that. The great thing is that they pair you when you take a project like this on. And bearing in mind, I'm only freelance. So, I'm sort of chosen when the project is needed, and they feel that there's a suitable project for me to work on. Um, and they're very good at matching up skill sets. So they kind of know what sort of thing that you're going to produce. They've probably looked at stuff that I've produced in the past and said, okay, this person would be pretty good for this specific character or this sort of area. So, and that kind of happened with the project that I just finished. And they pair you with a very good editor. I've been working with Richard Garton Wills on at Warhammer, working on, and he's very good. He's very good with the lore, and will sort of say, okay, they wouldn't perhaps do that. The character, perhaps is, that's outside of the lore. That's not really what they do. That's not how they think. So when you draft and put something together, obviously I'm sort of taking a bit of a leap of faith, and some things they'll let go, not because they don't want to change it because it's too much work, but they're happy that it sits within the parameters of the lore. And some stuff they'll go, no, that's not how it works. So can you rewrite this section? And you could end up rewriting quite a lot because your understanding of the world and the way that it works may be slightly more skewed towards traditional concepts that you've probably built up over the year of the race or of things that you've seen. So there is a sanity check that happens, and there's a secondary sanity check, because once your editor, who you work very closely with, who is sort of your guide, your Obi-Wan through this process, there's the desk editors that it goes to, and those guys and girls are really hot on lore. They know everything. They're looking for grammar. They're looking for issues, and so they do a secondary, third sort of sanity check, because I've done one, the editor's done one, and now the desk editor is doing another sanity check. So by the time, and then that will come back to me, and I'll reread it again just to make sure the essence of my story is still there. And so, with several people, the lore should be covered, so to speak. And you learn, the next time that project comes along, you go, okay, I'm not going to make this mistake. I'm not going to make this assumption about this character or this race, because I know that it works slightly differently. And hopefully, if they invite you back and you do a new project that's within a similar sort of sphere, you remember that lesson and you go, oh, okay, I don't know, Space Hulks are formed like this and they're not formed like that. So you go, okay, well that's I'm going to remember that, and I'm going to take that forward and do it slightly differently next time. And like anything, it's a learning process. I'm lucky that I enjoy history, so I'm always telling the kids about really obscure things that happened in World War II. I've got a great interest in World War II or any of the wars, just because I find it fascinating, and so I'll draw upon those sort of experiences and try to inject them into my narrative. It's the same for I've just finished a Rogue Trooper, and being asked to work on that is a great honor. but there is a lore there, and you have to understand the basics of what's going on. So you research it, and then you try to put your spin on it while keeping sort of one eye on the way they speak, the way they act, sort of things that have happened in the past, even down to equipment. Just knowing what the right terms for equipment are. You have to sometimes go, okay, go onto the internet and start researching, start trying to find out what they call this particular weapon, or and once you get that, you kind of get into a bit of a habit of looking for things like that. So, in same with Warhammer, you start going, okay, well, a bolt pistol is an explosive round. When it hits something, it sort of just blows that thing up, as opposed to just cutting through and coming out the other side. So where I had written something that may be more sort of traditional gun orientated, where the bullet passes through, actually these are a little bit more sort of explosive and will blow holes and chunks out of you. So you learn that, and you go, okay, well, next time I write a bolt pistol scene, that is going to be how that weapon is used, and you start to understand and start to fit within how everything works, from equipment to character speak to how races react.
Dude, that sounds like an amazing job and a very awesome opportunity. But I also feel like if I was you, I would have a little bit of anxiety because fans are very protective of lore. And they would notice if something's wrong, like, oh, why is this here? That's not supposed to be like that. Do you feel some sort of like pressure when it comes to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got another project where I haven't stepped into the lore
Mhm.
before in this area, and I'm
Yeah.
absolutely nervous. I'm bricking it. And you have to sort of trust the process. And the process is, you do a bit of research, you come up with the idea, you start putting a bit of text down, start trying to feel for the characters and the world. You
Right.
maybe send that test piece off to an editor to maybe check. And if they're sort of like, yeah, this is good, carry on, that's all the encouragement I need to sort of go, okay, I've stepped out the door and nobody's sort of shot me down, so I'm going to keep on walking and see how far I get. Um, and I think that, some of it is based upon fear. I think fear can be used. I think it's a good way of actually just going, okay, being out of your comfort zone is not a bad thing. Taking on projects that I've not written before, in worlds I've not written before, is only going to improve my writing. It's going to improve me. It's going to improve customer relations, because like anything, as a writer, you have to see yourself as a bit of a business. And people are going to say, hey, he's worked on Warhammer, or he's worked on Vikings. When I worked on the Vikings comic, I was told I couldn't. I had to write in between a series break. So I think it was series 5, and there had just been a big battle, and Lagertha had just sort of had a huge battle with I think it's the Ballers or whatever. And I wasn't allowed to use, because it was a mid-season break. I wasn't allowed to write any lore that would deviate from what was to come, and I didn't know what was to come. And I barely knew what had happened because I never watched Vikings, the TV series. So here's me going, okay, what do I know about Vikings? Well, they go raiding villages and stuff, and you watch a bit of the TV series, and I purposely watched the series up to, or series 5 up to that battle, because that's where my story would then carry on. And from that, I came up with a germ of an idea, something that would sit in between this season break without disrupting anything, but had enough nods to what was going on and felt like it was still within the universe. I mentioned characters, I mentioned gods, and it was basically, actually, the idea was that while this battle had just happened, some scavengers have come onto the field. So they're totally characters that you would never see in the thing, but they just pick a battlefield clean. They just go through digging, taking whatever they can from the corpses, trying to make money. And I reasoned that there would probably be a situation where opportunist locals who had just seen this battle would go, there's a load of dead people there that probably got some valuables on them. Let's go and see if we can take anything that we can before, the army sweeps through that have just won or whatever. And lo and behold, they find Lagatha's little, it's like a little axe or symbol necklace pendant. It's got a hammer, I think, on it. But they had to get that hammer back to the character before the season break restarted. So I came up with a little story that this little piece, even though it was on the character, just went missing, and they managed to, their dying breath managed to get it back to the main character. So when it started, never mentioned in the TV series, but it sat within the lore, and nobody has come back and said, well, this never happened, or this wouldn't happen this way. All the fans were picking up the comic because it was for San Diego Comic Con. So they were all mightily pleased with it. And for me, that was a result. That was, they trusted me with it. It was out of my comfort zone. I was scared, but I've got a job to do, and I can trust the process and trust my own ability to write, that I would come up with something. And yeah, it was good. It was a testing time. Don't get me wrong, but I know a little bit more about Vikings now, and I'm a little bit more confident writing about Vikings. So it's a good thing for me.
Exactly. So you definitely need to bet on yourself and have the confidence in your creativity.
Yep, absolutely.
I see that you have a Star Wars hat. Would you like to ever write for Star Wars?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, again, that's a really lore heavy thing. So I like writing on the fringes of the lore. So if the lore is a big circle and all the heavy stuff's in the middle, and the further out you go, all the well, something happened but nobody's ever done it type of thing, I'd probably happy sitting in that. If somebody said, okay, we want you to write, Han Solo doing this XYZ, I might feel, I know that the eye of Sauron, so to speak, would be really on you to make sure that you had knew everything and you got absolutely everything right. And again, you have to feel confident that you can deliver. I could probably deliver that. I wouldn't be adverse to it. Do I want to do it? If the money is good enough and the kudos was good enough, I would do it. If I felt that I was going to be sat there for 3 years for 100 quid, I'm not going to do it, even no matter it is Star Wars, but it's going to do me no good. It's going to break me at the end of the day. It's got to be worth it. And it's not always about the money. Sometimes it's about the opportunity. Projects I've taken on before sometimes don't pay amazing, but they unlock doors, and that is priceless. If it looks good on the CV, it convinces people that, this person is really good at writing because look, they've worked on this, and this. Therefore, let's give him this, which is even bigger, or adjacent. I think that's a good thing. I've taken on projects like that before, where it's like, okay, I'm not getting a lot out of it, but I can say I've worked on it. So that's always good.
Exactly.
So yeah, I would work on Star Wars, but if it fitted,
if it feels right,
my life and what I'm doing at the moment.
Exactly. So instead of writing, let's say, like one of the Skywalker saga films, you would write Rogue One type of thing.
Yes, Rogue One is awesome. That's where I would sit. I would sit and write, give me Andor, give me Rogue One. Those are the really sort of exciting stories for me, because I think those are the ones that creatively probably have a little bit more sort of canvas to work in.
Yes, definitely.
Whereas if I'm working on Han Solo, there's things that are going to constrain me, and it's going to be more of I wouldn't say on wheels, because no idea is really on wheels, but I'm going to be limited as to what I can and can't do. and it depends on how much say I want on the project and how much I'm just gonna. Well, I think the actor's term is sort of dial it in. You dial in an acting performance because you're paid to do a job, and so you do the best you can. But you're working with what you're working with at the end of the day. You're not going to win an Oscar for it.
Exactly. Gotcha. Yeah, and then Rogue One gave a lot of context to the beginning of episode 4, and
Yep.
then yeah, it expanded the lore in yeah, Rogue One was great.
Yeah, I love Rogue One. There's people that don't like it, people that don't think it's a great film. Um, my only downside was that I felt that the ending, I understood that they had to perish, spoiler alert, but
Yes.
and the idea is it was a ultimate sacrifice and things like that.
Hmm.
I just felt that they could have escaped. Um,
Gotcha.
given that they managed to get down onto the beach, they could have just gone to a ship and tried to get out.
Right.
Because the gate had been smashed anyway, so they could have got themselves out of that situation. I just felt it was just a tiny bit sort of, why'd you give up? These are the type of people that would just fight to the end. So
Gotcha.
even if they went down swinging, I just felt that they just preferred to sort of embrace each other and accept their fate. And I just felt that given that Andor isn't that type of character, I thought it was
Mm,
out of keeping for him. Maybe
got-
maybe he felt that because he's fought and he's done everything that he possibly could, that he could give
right.
no more. But these are hairs that we are splitting, and some people will love the ending, and some people will disagree with it. But yeah, I personally feel that I prefer characters that maybe don't accept their fate like that.
Gotcha. You want them to fight until the end, find a
Yeah,
way.
exactly. Yeah.
Gotcha. I love that. Andy, something that really caught my attention when last time we spoke, all the way back in September, I believe, is I've always used the words story and narrative like interchangeably as synonyms. Like, oh yeah, the story of this game, the narrative of this game. Uh, but you told me those are two different things, and that blew me away. Well, what's the difference between a story and narrative?
So there is a slight difference between the two. Um, and the way that I see it was my job when I was at Supermassive was a
Yes.
narrative designer. And it wasn't necessarily to come up with the story. That was part of it. But the story was always going to be written by a script writer. So, we as a narrative are almost creating the rules of which the story sits within. So, and the boundaries of that. So we create the characters, potentially. It doesn't always work like that, but we'll write the characters up. We'll give them hubris. We'll give them motivation. We'll give them, settings. We'll give them items that they could be using, that may be something important to them. Um, and really, we sort of create this guide potentially for a writer to come along and write the story. And very much at Supermassive, that was kind of our role. I mean, we would be tasked with writing a script. And so for writing a story and writing something with a start, middle, and end, that is what you do to write the story. But the narrative kind of is the rule to that story. And that also works with gameplay. So when you're working with the design and the levels designers, they will be writing stuff in code that potentially breaks the narrative wall. You've written this story, you've said this character can't act this way, and maybe the gameplay makes them act in a different way. And as narrative, you sort of step in and you go, "I'm sorry there, but that's not how the character would react." Now, and again, it's a kind of I would say a not a bartering system, but a sort of a shared discussion which you have with gameplay, where they potentially go, but we really want this to happen. We want players to have this type of experience. This is the level. This is what's going to happen. And as narrative, you're trying to sew the scenes up, that almost like going, okay, well, I've got a bit of play section here where the characters running around. I've got another bit of section here, and maybe there's a cutscene in the middle. But I'm trying to smooth everything out so this feels seamless and it doesn't feel like there's lots of joins. And as narrative, we are kind of papering over some of the joins. And so story is, for me, really getting into the meat of what's happening. Whereas narrative, you are doing that, but it's more like you are there to, as an advisor as well, to ensure that the story is working. So you're almost like a caretaker in the way, and ensuring that nothing is going off script and nothing is going in the wrong direction. And obviously, you're creating things that are outside the story directly. Writing NPC bark scripts or whatever. Just random things has to still fit within the story universe, but it won't necessarily be stuff that all it's doing is adding flesh to the world and padding out the world, not necessarily giving the player something important to worry about. It just feels like actually, there's a bit of a conversation between two guards about what they ate last night. And it may be important, it may not be, but your job is just to sort of add a little bit more flesh to that bone and that experience, so that players feel, don't feel like they're in a loop or a soulless world, and people are having conversations, meaningful conversations sometimes. So, yeah, there is I see that there's a slight difference. Caretaker narrative is for me a little bit more caretakers working with the game developers. Story feels like I would be working with narrative to ensure that the story is delivered correctly, and narrative would have that final sort of a little bit more of an overview of what the gameplay is going on. They would write in, we would write in suggestions of different gameplay mechanics in a script. So when we were writing it, we were going, oh, it'd be really cool if this person went up a ladder or something.
Right.
And as narrative, we can suggest that. And I wouldn't necessarily expect that from somebody who's writing the story. They would be probably writing little truncated sections, especially on a branching project, that just tie in to something that the narrative have a better overview of and have seen where everything sort of connects.
Gotcha. So basically, and correct me if I'm wrong, so narrative facilitates the story through gameplay?
Potentially. Yeah,
Okay.
that is something that narrative would also do.
Okay.
I think for narrative, the role will change slightly. You could be starting the ball rolling on a new project, coming up with all the ideas and coming up with the story, potential gameplay ideas, and then at that point you may be asked to write a script that just gives a bit more sort of meat to the characters so that it can get taken away from you. And then at that point it gets everything, if it's all looking good, it would go off to the game director, and the game director would then read it. He would then come up, or she would come up with ideas, or they would come up with ideas, and basically start breaking things down and building a game out of it with the game designers. Now, your involvement may be over at that point. You may just be a voice that they come back to and go, hey, we wanted to do this with this character. Are you okay with that? And as narrative, I'd go, yeah, that's okay. That makes sense. Or, hey, yeah, that would be. But down here, you're going to have a problem. And this character isn't going to be, that's going to be at odds with where we had set the idea of where each of the characters end up. At which point the game director may go, tough, it's my game. And go, fair dues. Okay, nothing I can do. All I can do is like a horse to water, go, I'll point out problems and go, okay, well, that consistency, that that doesn't work. There's a continuity error here. And as narrative, that's part of the job, to sort of pick up those continuity errors and ensure that you deliver a cohesive story. And that could be working with the guy or the girl writing the story.
Awesome. In your opinion, what makes a successful story in video games, for example, since we have a gaming podcast? What makes a
Well,
successful story?
that's almost like asking what makes a successful book. If you take anything, I think if you can create a story that immerses a player from a game point of view, that they come out of it thinking, "Hey, that was where's the time gone?" I absolutely love that. I'm playing Indiana Jones at the moment and the Great Circle. Now, it works for me because one, nostalgia is a potent weapon, not weapon, um, and is a dangerous one actually because nostalgia can get you into a lot of trouble. You can believe that nostalgia will see you through, when in fact people look at it and go, "Why did you touch it? You should have just left it as it was." And that, if you look at Indiana Jones, maybe 4 and 5, they're probably examples of people saying you probably should have just left it alone. Um, However, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, for me, has lots of elements in there that go, hey, it gives me gameplay that makes me feel like Indiana Jones. It gives me dialogue that makes me feel like Indiana Jones. It looks like Indiana Jones. There's comedic moments in there that tap into the Indiana Jones vibe. There's secrets, there's traps. All of this ticks, my nostalgia box for a really good Indiana Jones experience. Um, and so for me, that immediately sets apart from anything. If I play Assassin's Creed, I'm sure the game is great. I'm sure people love it. But for me, the story isn't engaging enough because I never grew up with it, so it doesn't necessarily talk to me. Whereas Indiana Jones does. So I think one is understanding, your audience will dictate whether it's a good story or not, because the
Ooh,
people that it means will go, "Hey, look, this feels good." Their review scores will tell you whether it's a good story, even if you believe in your heart you've got to listen to critics at
yes.
the end of the day. Things like The Last of Us again has done very well because it plays on a lot of human emotions. Um, it it messes around with the sort of the end of day tropes. It gives you an ending which is slightly unexpected. And I think if your story delivers surprises, continues to make you feel like you're part of something special, and I can't give you the X factor as to what that is. I think sometimes it happens by accident, sometimes it happens by design. There are writers that can write a story with that X factor. For me, I don't think it personally happens like that. I think it happens by accident, and I'm quite happy about that. I'm quite happy that there's moments that just appear in the middle of the story or at the end of the story that I didn't expect as a writer, because I'm the type of writer that does plot things out, but I will shift goalposts as I'm writing to go, an even better opportunities now just presented itself. As long as I can get that story back to where I need it to be, I'm going to go down this path instead of perhaps the path I had already plotted. Um, and a large part of it also rests on the gameplay. The gameplay is going to tell you. You can have the greatest story ever told in a computer game, but if your gameplay sucks, nobody's going to remember that. They're going to remember how bad the gameplay was and go, "Yeah, that's really crap."
Fair enough.
Um, and you're going to suffer for it. So it has to. There's lots of moving parts. Gameplay, the customer, marketing. Um, they're all going to sort of dictate whether people are going to really go for it or not. Um, if you can't get your audience to play the game, then who knows if it's a good story or not. So there's a few elements, and it is a challenge, for writing. Um, and you think you're just sometimes as a writer, you go, "I got to tell a really good story," but still have to think about, well, who am I talking to at the end of the day? Are they going to enjoy this? Are they getting an experience? I'm not just writing for me, but I am writing for people that are going to spend money on this product,
Hmm.
and are willing to spend money on this product, and have worked hard to, get the money to spend it on the product. And if they get it and they don't feel like they've got value for money, or they're not happy with it, they're going to tell you. And I think all you can do is take that on the chin and
Hmm.
accept that your work isn't going to be for everybody,
Yeah,
and take the
exactly.
victories. If people give you good reviews and say this was a really good story, then
Hmm.
I'll let them decide. I write the best story I can. I've done that on the Warhammer. I've got no idea if people think it's going to be good. My editor says it's good. Erica, who worked on it again, who I worked with on the hero interviews, has read it and says, yeah, it's really good, really enjoyed it. She came up with lots of ideas, and has helped sort of make it better. And I've got myself, and they're the only three people that have read it. When it goes out to the wider world, I've got to hope that, the fans who know that world really well, feel that it honors and the sort of the canon that's been created for it, and they get behind it, and they feel that it's a story that they can engage with, that gives them highs and lows and emotional sort of roller coaster, and a satisfying ending. And you've got to hope. A lot of it is faith.
Exactly, is what you mentioned before. It's really up to the readers to determine, or the players, like the audience, basically, to determine if something is good or not. It's really up to them. You can only do so much, right?
Yeah, that's right. You can only do the best, and you
Exactly.
may feel it's the best it can be, and you know you could be wrong. So people will come back to you and go, "I really hated this story. Didn't like this bit. Didn't like that bit." And all you can do as a writer go, "Okay, thank you," and just take it on the chin.
Exactly.
I've been a creative for many, many years and doing graphic design, and you have to understand that you put pieces of work up for people to shoot down. And sometimes you can't get them to pick the really good stuff. Sometimes you can go, yeah, that wasn't the story I wanted to tell, but other
Mm,
factors have dictated that this is the story, and I've done the best I can with this story. I wanted to do this, and I may have wanted to do this type of thing. There are other factors, and fans won't necessarily know that or care.
sure.
All they see is what's in front of them. They may not factor in that, there may have been an executive decision higher up that actually changed your story, and you've had to work within those boundaries and
Hmm.
go, well, actually, Bambi wasn't shot at the beginning of Bambi. It was only a flesh wound, because somebody on executive says we can't kill deer. It has to be, the mother wasn't killed. She was only wounded. And so you have to rewrite that, and somebody may come along and say this would have been much better if the mother had been killed, and Bambi would have been an orphan. And you go, yeah, I tried to do that, but they didn't want it. So
Yeah, yeah,
you know,
yeah,
that's all you can do, really.
yeah. There's so much you can do, right? I've noticed something when it comes to stories, and I've thought, if I think about all the stories that I like, what is like a common thread? And I've noticed that the stories that really appeal to me are the stories that have a good conflict.
Yep.
I feel like conflict really draws people in. Conflict of interest, of ideas, two people debating, a battle in a movie, two armies. Uh, conflict drives story forward, right?
Yeah, there has to be a challenge. Whoever your hero or anti-hero is, they always have to be challenged,
Right.
in order to drive a story forward. And I think that that is the engine really of all the stories. Doesn't matter what you're writing, there is some challenge, whether it's on an emotional level, whether it's on a physical level, whether it's a literal challenge. There's a mountain that you've got to climb over.
Right.
Um, you know, Something has to be beaten, and
Mm,
it's the emotional journey that your character takes on that challenge, and
right.
what they have to do to navigate through it, that that is hugely appealing. The changes that they have to make because the usual way doesn't work. If you look at something like Leon, the professional,
Okay.
he's very good at his job. He's a trained assassin. He's one of the best in the business. Yet his challenge really comes in the form of a victim, a girl that basically sort of teaches him the meaning of love and caring for something. In a world that he's only cared about his plant, his yucca plant or whatever it is. He's now having to care for something that means a lot to him, and that vulnerability, ends up his demise. Really, ultimately he has to sacrifice himself in order for her to live, because they can't get out of the situation unless he takes out the person, and the only way to do that is to get close. And in the ending scene, he sacrifices himself because he knows that if he takes out Gary Oldman's character, is it Streisand or something, he basically saves Matilda. And he has a challenge in a very good adversary, and he's constantly in conflict with this person because he's in saving her, he puts himself on a path to this conflict. So Leon's a very good film for that. Just seeing somebody that is at top of their game, but actually are depowered just by a child, you know, and dies because of the child, but it's a heroic death, and ultimately that's an amazing story.
Yeah, as you mentioned before, change, right? It's maybe why people like Breaking Bad. They like to see the transition of Walter White becoming Heisenberg, right?
Yep.
Yeah, change is very important.
Yeah, and all the way through that Breaking Bad, he has to continually adapt because he keeps on getting himself deeper and deeper, and he takes out one
Mhm,
issue only to
mhm.
be presented by a bigger dog that comes along and
It's a
wants
Hydra,
more
yeah.
of the pie. And every time he's going up and up the chain, and he can't get out of it,
Hmm.
until he kind of reasons that he has to take everybody out. But in doing so, he has to sacrifice himself. Um, you know, even that he has multiple challenges from just Jesse trying to survive through to his wife, his cancer, his children, his brother-in-law sort of snooping around, and he has to take him out. So he's constantly challenged, and he has to do whatever it takes, and in doing whatever it takes, which is stepping out of the comfort zone of what somebody would normally do, presents even more challenges, and just adds fuel to the fire, and it just becomes bigger and bigger, which I love. I love stuff like that.
Yeah, when we were talking about Rogue One, that's what you said, right? You want to see characters do their best, right?
Yep.
Um, when it comes to video games, what in your subjective opinion, what are some of the best video game narratives that you've seen before? That you're like, okay,
Um,
this game has amazing narrative.
so yeah, I should. Well, look, I've already mentioned The Last of Us. I thought
Sure.
that was really good. I'm really enjoying Indiana Jones. I think the
Hmm.
narrative on that is superb. Um, Trying to think of some of the other ones. There's so many games. I'm trying to sort of cast my mind back. One that isn't necessarily um, told, but it's shown is Journey. Um, it's I can't
Gotcha.
remember who did that, but actually Journey's narrative is really cool, and it's a looped one. So I really really enjoy that. Um, Look, you could go to things like Red Dead Redemption. That is so rich. I don't even know how you begin to write something like that. There has to, you have to do it in truncated teams or something that are all working together but independently to write that much. Um, those are the ones that sort of spring to my mind straight off the bat. Um, yeah, I can't think of anybody, and this sounds really bad. I can't really think of anybody else because I've just been so focused on my own stuff that most of the time I default to non-narrative gameplay. I usually play World of Tanks because I
Oh,
want something that just resets my brain,
yeah.
gets me out of thinking. So I tend to pick games that don't have narrative because I'm so absorbed in the narrative and so focused on the narrative.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Even now, I'm supposed to be having a break for Christmas, but I'm thinking about this new story and this next story that I'm supposed to be working on for the comic. So I tend to desensitize myself to narrative and actually step out and just play stuff that doesn't necessarily have a strong narrative that is just blowing things up because I can't throw myself into too much story. Um, but look, there's been things that I've played. You know, Until Dawn was really good for narrative, but that's quite hefty um, and quite chunky and meaty, and one that you need to pay attention to everything that's going on. Things like Fable, I really enjoyed, and any of the Baldur's Gate, probably 1 and 2, and Fallout as well. You know, those kind of narrative stories, I are so rich, so dense. Again, it would be scary to work on. But I'm a big Fallout fan, so anything like that, just I would lap up Fallout.
Which
But
one is your
again,
favorite
because there's
Fallout?
so sorry.
Which one is your favorite Fallout game?
Yeah, you see, that's a difficult one. See, I really did enjoy Las Vegas.
Yeah,
Um,
New Vegas. Yeah.
yeah, the New Vegas one, that was it.
Hmm.
Um, but I played a lot of Fallout 4, so Fallout 4 is perhaps the most that I'm used to. But actually, Fallout 3, from memory, I think had a cool story as well. Again, I'm going back. I'm going back to scenes. I'm going, oh, I remember this scene by a monument, and maybe I just enjoyed the gameplay more than anything. Like anything, a lot of lore, you tend to start hitting the old X button, and you can be really. I'm guilty of it. It's like, okay, I've got too much story to get me to the
Yes.
gameplay
Yes.
because I
Yes.
haven't got much time. I would love to sit and listen to everything, and that probably doing a disservice to the people that have written it and worked on it. But you know, I haven't got that much time, especially at my age. Time is a very finite thing,
Yeah.
and I've got to sort of decide what I'm going to listen to and what I'm going to enjoy. Um, so yeah, the other things were probably something like Final Fantasy VII and things like that. I spent a lot of time
Ooh,
with the
yeah.
materials and the story on those. But again, by the time the newest one came out, I was like, I'm done on this. I can't spend any more time playing this game. It was something that was a young person for me. When I get older, it's like
Right.
if I buy one thing, I'm going to finish it because there's too many games I've got that I've started it. Like is it Sitfu? I've got, and
Mhm.
like the one the character keeps on coming back, and I love the story. I think the story is really cool. I haven't got time to play it. Ghost of Tsushima. I haven't got time to to finish it.
Dude, it's so good though.
There's just so much. It's so much to do. There's so much story. But there's only one of me, and I've got to split my time between working and actually playing games. Um, if there was something, like Warhammer, I spent quite a bit of time playing Warhammer
Right.
for obvious
For your
reasons.
for research, right?
Um, yeah, of course, and enjoyed the story in that. But again, it's finding the time to unlock all of that. If I've got lore to read, I haven't got that much time to sit and play a computer game.
Gotcha. Andy, let's say, so since you're a consultant, let's say for example, I have my gaming company and I'm like, Andy, I'm gonna hire you. I'm gonna need you to be like the narrative consultant or narrative designer. How would you help my game become successful, for example? Like, what is it that you do when you go in companies?
Well, we look at different things. I would start by going, what are you trying to produce? Who is your audience and who are you talking to?
Got it. Ask
You know,
questions.
trying to work out the lay of the land for your target audience, then trying to work out your core loop. I think that's really, really important. And once you start to understand what the core loop is, the sort of the way that players feed into the game, that understand how the economics of it work. What are they doing on a daily basis? When are they coming back to it? Are they doing it daily? Are they twice a day? Are they coming back? How much money are they spending? Are they spending any money? What are they getting as reward, and what's the dopamine hit for them? Once I've kind of got that framework, I could start then say, well, okay, where does the story fit within this? Where do we drop the lore? Where does the gameplay come forward? Where does the lore take a back seat? Where do they go forward together? And really, that's kind of where I start. And once we've got the basics down, and actually a lot of it will, the narrative isn't really touched until the framework is there. For me, it would then be taking the story. What is the story element? Giving them characters. Then understanding where they fit within the core loop and how they get the dopamine, so that would then feed ideas. Okay, well, this character is an evil character, and what are they going to do in order to complete their core loop on a daily or a weekly basis? And what story element do we weave into that? Are they collecting souls? Are they going to kill innocent people? So, our story needs to feed into that you've got somebody that's a little bit more like Elric with Stormbringer, that is actually, he's got a cursed sword that's going to kill people, or he's a vampire and he needs to eat, drink the blood of his victims, but he only picks bad people. So that way, that feeds the core loop, because he keeps that character alive, and they're getting more stronger and stronger the more people they eat. Therefore, the core loop is being fed, and is some sort of perpetual motion going on there. So, and then from that point, you kind of take not just a little bit of a back seat, but you take a little bit more of a high view, and you kind of let people do their thing. The teams start cooking in all the different departments, and then somebody will come up and go, "Oh, this is really good, but the gameplay ending doesn't quite work." And so you start to work a little bit on that, on the gameplay side of things, and thinking how that could work. And then tying that back into the narrative. Well, narratively, can it work like that? Because, you've set your story in the 1900s and you want to have, machine guns coming in, at that time. So you have to kind of make it work within that context.
Right.
Well, maybe machine guns aren't the thing that it works. Maybe it's something a little bit more rudimentary, single lever revolvers or whatever. So your ending changes accordingly. So it will vary, and I will, as a consultant, I won't necessarily just be picking up the narrative. Now, it could be that is all I'm brought in for. So I will just look at the story and go, okay, look, you've got all of your core loop worked out. You've got all of the ins and outs. And from a narrative point of view, let's start building characters. Who are your characters? Well, you haven't got any because you've got an idea, but you haven't actually got the characters. Okay, well, let's flesh the characters out. Let's give them names. Let's give them agency. Let's give them hubris. Let's give them ideas for how they could be equipment, but could that equipment then be tied to the core loop? So their weapon is upgrading each time. So when they get stronger in their levels, you're then going back to the gameplay mechanics. So you're writing, but you're thinking, how does it always tie back to the gameplay? How does it feed into other parts of the game? So that's how I would start working. There's multiple facets, and lots of different areas that you can tap into. So it's not as straightforward as going, well, what would you do? Because I could do lots of different things. I could just be coming in and going, hey, how do we do a retention mechanic that gives them a bit of story each time that a new season comes in? It could be that you've got your story and you just need a broader story that progresses each time a new season comes in, a bit like the Fortnite map. the character moves on to another world, but you need that bit of narrative as how that character moves on and what happens and what changes. And at that point, you do that, and then you go, and these are the gameplay changes. We're putting in jetpacks, or we're doing cars with weapons, so that gives and feeds the machine again. It's always about feeding that core loop and that player engagement. So there's lots of different mechanics and lots of different things that you could be doing.
Yeah, that was a great answer. Great answer. Yeah, I like that. When it comes to people who want to get in the industry as narrative designers, they want to write for video games. You, as a person who has a lot of experience there, what would be your advice for the new generation?
Well, look, I think the first thing to do is to write. I think it doesn't matter whether you're writing computer games. I think keep writing is definitely one of the things I would say. Write for yourself, write genre stuff that would work in different computer games. If you want to work on the next Alien film, write some sci-fi. Or the next Alien franchise game, write sci-fi so that you have something that's in an adjacent wheel. I think go to game jams. They're very good for a lot of the computer game companies and industry do a game jams. So it's very good to go onto that and get the creative juices flowing. Produce your own stuff, I think, is important. So that you can get a body of work behind you. Try and get published. And if you can't get published, publish yourself. And then put the feelers out. I think networking is one of the biggest things that you could do. And networking with industry events, write it. There's like the Guild of Great Britain. They do like little narrative events where you can go along, go to develop, or any of the shows, especially the sort of the gaming shows for developers. So it's a little bit more internal, so that you understand, you meet peers, go to GDC talks, maybe have a look at GDC talks online about narrative. Just absorb all of these different sort of resources. There's a whole load of resources online. GDC talks are all online anyway. You can go and look at any of them. So I certainly recommend going to look at that, and then look at different things. There's lots of different books, and not all of them I would say are gospel. There is things like Save the Cat and stuff like that.
I actually read that one before. Yeah,
but that's not necessarily, it's not always the way to do it. There are different ones. I think there's a Dan Harmon, is it, who did Rick and Morty. He's got like a wheel of narrative of how to write the perfect story. Sometimes look at 3 acts, sometimes look at 6 acts. It doesn't always try to break convention, but try to do so where other people have failed. Take on board those failures and go, okay, well, why didn't it work? So I think it's always looking to develop your own skills and network. I think one of the things I've been really good at, and one of the things that I've always sort of excelled at, even my father said that, is that I've always managed to find opportunities, and opportunities will, they don't always land on your lap. I've had it a few times that an opportunity has just pinged into my email, but a lot of the time I've had to be the right person in the right time to ask the right question, and and get used to putting yourself out there and say, hey, can you give me a go at something like that? I think you're going to have to be a little bit brave. Sometimes it's going to a computer game company and going, hey, can I do some writing with you? Even if it's work experience or whatever, an intern role. Sure. Obviously, that's difficult for somebody that's got a mortgage and you're paying. Younger audiences who are living at home or have got a low rent or shared accommodation, it's probably a little bit easier. Um, People that are sort of established, I think it's a harder task, but hopefully a body of work will get you a opportunity, and from that, you have to jump with it, and do what it takes to deliver something awesome, so that you get your foot in the door. And once you get your foot in the door, you get a good reputation, hopefully a good reputation. You use that as a springboard to the next thing and the next thing.
Exactly.
When I lost my job at Supermassive, and I didn't lose it for any fault of my own, other than the company had to make
Just
redundancies
layoffs,
because
right?
it needed to save money, as the industry is
Exactly.
very fickle at the moment, and money needs to be saved. And so I actually offered. I've been at the company just over 5 years, so I knew that there'd be a good redundancy package that would see me safe. But I was stepping into the unknown consulting. I didn't know what I would be going for. And so I started to keep a blog on my LinkedIn page of basically living under the shadow of redundancy, I think I called it. And I was positive, always positive on LinkedIn, trying to say, hey, I'm upbeat, I'm good. This is a new challenge, but this is what I've been doing. I spoke to these people, had a good conversation here. It's scary, but let's do the best we can. And I actually had a lot of people DM me saying, look, this is really inspirational. And from that, I was out of work for 2 days before somebody came in and said, I've seen your posts. You write really, I love the stuff you've done. I've loved your portfolio of work. I want you to work with us. And ended up working with Cathedral Studios. I've been with them for 9 months now. I thought it would be like a little 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, I'm still there. And the guys are fab. And they got a really good project as well, the Bournemouth. And at the same time, because I knew I was being released from like a non-compete clause, a lot of the time when you work for another computer game company, you're not allowed to work on other stuff. It's just the way it is. Some companies are okay. Bigger companies are a little bit funny about IPs and things. They think, they prefer people don't work on that type of stuff. So I knew I was coming out of my contract with Supermassive. So I just emailed the editor at 2000 AD. I said, hey, look, I'm out of work. Have you got anything? He said, yeah, I've got Rogue Trooper. Do you want it? Six issues of Rogue Trooper. I was like, yeah, give it to me. I've never worked on Rogue Trooper. Give it to me. I want work.
Dude.
So literally, just because of that one door had closed, it opened the door to Rogue Trooper, that opened the door to Warhammer. So you never know what's going to happen.
That's
But it's
right.
all down to networking. It's all down to. I got the Warhammer gig because one of my writer friends suggested me to the editor of Warhammer and said, this guy's really good and he's looking for work. Why don't you work with him? And he read my stuff and was like, yeah, we could use you. Do you want to do this? And, you just don't know. But that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't spent many years meeting people, going to the pub, not getting, raucously drunk or anything, but just networking, buying somebody a drink and going, hey, remember me down the line. And people will remember you down the line if you're
Yeah.
good. If you're polite, if you're good, if you're courteous,
Yeah.
if you pay it forward sometimes as well. I do some mentoring for people. And I go, hey, look, this person's really good. And I've helped people steer their careers into narrative just through something like Limit Break. And I don't know, that person may be in a position of power 10 years down the line when I'm close to retirement and thinking about needing another job. And they may go, hey, I remember you. You helped me out on my first time. Let's have a chat. You just don't know. The industry is really small.
Dude, yes, I'm just nodding a lot because yes, you're preaching right now. Networking is extremely important. Paying it forward, as you mentioned before, perhaps maybe that person right now cannot help you the way you want to be helped, but maybe in 10 years they'll be in a position of power.
Yeah,
So, dude, that's so true.
you don't
Yes,
know. And it's like going back to our original question, about working on a story and leaving it to percolate.
yes,
Sometimes relationships are like that. You just feed the relationship, not to use them, but you genuinely get on with people.
exactly.
And you never know that somewhere down the line that person may not come back. It may come back and go, hey, I want to work with you. Let's do something. Um, And that's exactly the same for your ideas. You just leave it, and sometimes you can go back to it, and it's just like, hey, I know how to do this now. This is the time to dust off that idea that I had 20 years ago and do something with it because I'm ready for it.
That's beautiful. Yeah, guys, what Andy says is 100% true. Network. Go out there, talk to people. You can be the best writer, the best gameplay designer, the best 3D modeler, but if people don't know you, you ain't going anywhere. Gotta network. Very important. Andy, last but not least, because we're almost there, we're almost on time. Where can people find you?
I've kind of switched. I was on X, not on there anymore. I am on there, but I don't really post on there as for obvious reasons. But
Gotcha.
I'm over on Blue Sky as Andy
Okay, gotcha.
Ewington. Yeah, so I'm over there. I think it's Andy Andi.Ewington at Blue Sky. So catch me there. I tend to just put a lot of D&D cats and dogs jokes. I've got about 900 on there. So if you fancy a laugh, I'm on there, but I'm always open to, catch me on LinkedIn if you want to ask me questions. You're more than welcome to connect with me. I'm always happy to connect with people and give advice.
Awesome, Andy. It has been a pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks so much for coming and giving us all that wealth of information. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been an awesome time and have a great Christmas.
Thank you. Merry Christmas, guys.